My name is Evelyn, and for decades I believed the biggest challenge of my life was raising my son, Michael. Turns out I was dead wrong. The real test started the day his wife, Olivia, became a mother. Look, I love my grandchildren Leo and Maya more than anything. They are tiny, adorable, messy chunks of my heart, and spending time with them was supposed to be my golden years reward. But Olivia? She turned that reward into a prison sentence, complete with maximum security surveillance. It all started subtly, which is how these things usually do. When Leo was born, she was hyper-vigilant, which is normal for a first-time mom. Organic cotton, filtered water, no screen time, all the bells and whistles. I respected it, even if I, a mother who successfully raised a perfectly functioning adult, sometimes found it a bit much. I'd just smile and say, "Whatever you need, honey." But then came the cameras. Michael and Olivia bought a beautiful new house, and when they asked me to start watching the kids 3 days a week so Olivia could return to her part-time job, I was ecstatic. A regular schedule with my little ones? Perfect. A week before I started, Michael sheepishly told me they were installing a new home security system. "It's for peace of mind, Mom," he explained, avoiding my eyes. "It covers the front door, the back deck, and, well, the living room and the nursery." My stomach dropped, but I forced a smile. "Oh, security is so important these days," I chirped, trying to sound supportive. But I knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't about burglars. It was about me. Olivia didn't trust me. The first few days were manageable, but the feeling of being watched was like a cold, wet blanket. You know that feeling when you're just about to scratch an itch on your nose, and suddenly you remember there's a camera staring right at you? That was my life. I'd be reading Leo a story and I'd catch myself sitting up straighter. I'd be playing patty cake with Maya and I'd monitor my tone, making sure I sounded nothing less than perfectly cheerful and nurturing. Every laugh, every stern no, every quiet moment of frustration was being recorded, archived, and most importantly judged. It wasn't just the recording, it was the real-time interaction. Olivia, working from home in a different room or sometimes running quick errands, had the live feed pulled up on her phone constantly. I swear, the woman had a sixth sense for when I was about to do something wrong. One afternoon I was trying to get Maya, who was 2, to eat her mashed sweet potato. She was in a fussy mood and was vigorously shaking her head. I tried the airplane game. I tried making silly faces. Finally, I just placed the spoon near her mouth and said in a slightly exasperated but gentle voice, "Maya, just one bite for Grandma, please?" Not 10 seconds later, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. The camera must have been pointed directly at the high chair. "Olivia. Text 2:15 p.m. Evelyn." Maya responds better to positive affirmation. "Please don't use a demanding tone. We are trying to encourage an independent relationship with food." I stared at the phone. Demanding tone? I literally just said, "Just one bite." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. But I swallowed my pride, pasted on a smile for the camera I knew was watching, and replied with a cheerful, "Got it." Flying saucer approach commencing. This happened all the time. If I let the kids play with the dog outside for 5 minutes too long, I'd get a text about unnecessary sun exposure. If I gave Leo a dinosaur toy that had a slightly sharp edge, which it didn't, it was certified toddler safe, I'd get a text about choking hazards and liability. I started mentally compiling a list of the surveillance incidents, and it became a little game I played with myself just to stay sane. There was the Great Blanket Incident, where I dared to cover Leo with a normal knitted blanket instead of his $150 weighted organic cotton one. Text: "Evelyn, Leo prefers the weight of the brown blanket for deeper sleep." The irony? He was wide awake playing with his toes. Then there was the juice debacle. I'd given them a tiny cup of apple juice, watered down by about 75%. Not even 30 seconds later, the inevitable text arrived. "We are sugar-free until age 4. Please stick to water or whole milk only. This is non-negotiable." She made it sound like I was spiking my grandkids' drinks with whiskey. One day I was changing Maya's diaper and she was wriggling like a little fish. I was trying to keep her entertained, so I started making silly sounds and tickling her belly lightly. She was giggling hysterically. It was a sweet, normal grandmother-grandchild moment. Except apparently the angle of the camera meant Olivia thought I was being too rough. "Olivia. Text, 11 a.m. Evelyn. Is there an issue with Maya's diaper change? She looks distressed. If you can't manage it, please wait for me. I'm only 10 minutes away." I looked at Maya, who was still chuckling, her little eyes crinkled with joy. Distressed? She was having fun. This was the moment I realized the cameras weren't just a physical boundary. They were an emotional shield for Olivia, allowing her to criticize me remotely without having to face me, and allowing her to interpret basic normal human interaction as incompetence or cruelty. She wasn't watching to ensure safety. She was watching to find fault. It wasn't about the kids. It was about control and proving she was the superior parent, even to the person who raised the father of her children. I felt so humiliated. I'm a respected woman. I volunteered at the library for years, I helped run the neighborhood watch, and I raised Michael into a successful architect. Yet here I was, being treated like a novice intern who needed constant hourly supervision. I even started setting alarms on my phone, the Olivia check-in alarm, just so I could prepare for the next text message, which always came on the hour, every hour. The moment I heard that little ding, I knew a criticism was imminent. Michael, bless his heart, tried to mediate, but he was useless. He was so terrified of rocking the boat with Olivia that he just mumbled, "She just cares a lot, Mom. It's her anxiety." Anxiety is one thing, weaponized paranoia is another. I told him he needed to speak to her, that this was making me feel unwelcome and frankly angry. He just sighed and said, "I'll talk to her, Mom. I promise." He never did. I love my son, but watching him be completely steamrolled by his wife was incredibly disappointing. He saw the text, he saw the camera setup, and he knew how much it was upsetting me, yet he kept prioritizing a quiet life over defending his mother. One day Michael called me while I was watching the kids. He was traveling for work and sounded tired. I told him about the latest offense. I'd given Leo a slightly older episode of Sesame Street, the one with the talking lamp, remember that one? And Olivia had sent a text saying the color palette was too aggressive for a developing brain. Michael actually laughed. "Mom, that's crazy." "It is crazy, Michael. And I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm performing a continuous 3-day-a-week audition and I keep failing." He was quiet for a moment. "Just ignore the text sometimes, Mom. She gets busy." "Ignore the texts." "Michael, if I ignore the text, she'll call. If I ignore the call, she'll drive home. She's checking these cameras every hour on the hour. It's a job, not a visit." This level of scrutiny went on for months. I got used to speaking to my grandchildren while simultaneously performing for an invisible audience. I learned where the main camera in the living room was mounted, above the mantel, angled perfectly to catch the couch in the play area, and I subconsciously stayed within its view, careful not to even accidentally bump a piece of furniture too loudly. I was constantly monitoring my facial expressions, making sure my grandma smile was always at a perfect 7 out of 10 warmth level. It made me bitter. I wasn't just babysitting. I was a glorified security guard with the emotional bandwidth of a stressed-out nanny who couldn't quit because the kids were family. I started to dread Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The moment I walked through that door, I felt the cold metallic stare of the lens, and I knew the clock was ticking until the next judgmental, passive-aggressive notification. But the worst part? It was chipping away at the joy of being with Leo and Maya. I was so focused on being perfect for Olivia's surveillance that I sometimes missed the little things. The way Leo would whisper to his stuffed giraffe, or the way Maya would stop mid-toddle to examine a dust bunny. The camera didn't allow for spontaneity, for messy, imperfect love. It demanded perfection. And I was tired of trying to deliver it. The tension was building and I knew deep down that something had to give. I was waiting for the moment when one of her accusations would be the final straw, the one that broke the camel's back and finally pushed me to fight back. I just didn't know what that accusation would be. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching this video from. The friction simmered beneath the surface, a low-grade constant headache that was simply my life now. I tried to focus on the children, burying myself in blocks and picture books, but Olivia's surveillance system ensured I was never truly alone with them. Then came the Buzz Lightyear incident. This wasn't a text message about the wrong kind of milk or a loud tone. This was a calculated public display of distrust that humiliated me in front of my own family. It happened on a Friday afternoon. Leo, who was 4, was obsessed with the movie Toy Story, specifically Buzz Lightyear. He had an enormous Buzz action figure, the kind that talked and had wings that popped out with the push of a button. That toy was his prized possession. We were playing in the living room, right under the watchful eye of the camera, building an elaborate castle out of magnet tiles. Buzz was the castle's guard. Maya was crawling around, being a delightful little menace trying to knock over our magnetic walls. At one point, Maya snatched Buzz and tried to pull off his helmet. Leo understandably got upset. I swooped in, gently redirected Maya to a plush toy and handed Buzz back to Leo. "He needs a rest, sweetie," I said to Leo, placing the enormous action figure high up on a shelf out of Maya's reach. "Let's build a super strong wall now." Leo was happy. Maya was distracted. Crisis averted. I continued playing with them until Michael came home around 5:30 p.m. I kissed the kids goodbye, exchanged pleasantries with Michael, and noted that Olivia wasn't home yet. She was at an important client meeting, according to Michael. I was already halfway to my car when my phone chimed. It wasn't a text from Olivia. It was a picture. It was a zoomed-in photo of the Buzz Lightyear figure still sitting on the high shelf. The text below it wasn't from Olivia either. It was a post in the family group chat, the one that included Michael, me, Olivia's sister, and even Michael's aunt. Olivia, group chat, 6:01 p.m. found Buzz Lightyear hidden away on a high shelf. Poor Leo was searching for him desperately when I got home. Reminder: we do not take toys away as punishment or hide them from the children. If Leo or Maya are struggling, we redirect, not remove. This is essential for respecting their autonomy and feelings. My hands started shaking. She didn't text me, she posted it to the family group chat. She framed my simple common-sense action of putting a beloved, delicate toy out of the reach of a teething toddler as a punitive, psychological act of cruelty. Hidden away. It was on a shelf, a clear, visible shelf, to protect it from a 2-year-old. I immediately texted Michael privately. "Evelyn, text 6:03 p.m. Michael, what is this?" I put Buzz on the shelf so Maya wouldn't break it. I didn't hide it. "I'm so angry," she posted that to the whole group. Michael, text 6:05 p.m. Mom, don't stress. He just had a hard day. She saw the video on the camera, she probably misinterpreted. Just delete it. Misinterpreted? I wanted to scream. She didn't misinterpret. She chose the most hostile interpretation possible and then broadcasted it for public shaming. She wanted everyone to think I was an old, cruel woman who emotionally manipulates her grandchildren. I couldn't just delete it. My dignity was on the line. I typed out a reply to the group chat, trying to keep my tone factual, even though I was seething. "Evelyn, group chat, 6:10 p.m. just to clarify for everyone. Maya was trying to chew the plastic helmet off Buzz. To protect Leo's favorite toy from damage and Maya from choking on plastic, I placed the figure on the nearby shelf. It was a redirection strategy, not a punishment." Silence. Nobody replied. Not even Michael, who was home and knew the truth. An hour later, Olivia replied, cutting and sweet as ever. "Olivia, group chat, 7:15 p.m. Thanks for the clarification, Evelyn. So important to explain our actions to the kids too, even when they're young. We want them to feel heard." 2 hearts. It was a perfectly crafted reply, passive-aggressive and completely dismissive of my explanation, forcing the conversation back to her original premise. I was the one who needed to learn how to parent, and my excuses were just that, excuses. The shame was overwhelming. I knew her sister and Michael's aunt would see it and probably side with the young modern mother over the out-of-touch grandmother. The cameras, once an irritating inconvenience, were now the tools of my public execution. Olivia had used a recording of an innocent moment to create a false narrative about my character. I spent the weekend stewing. Michael didn't call. I felt completely isolated. It was clear that as long as I kept showing up to watch the kids, Olivia had complete power over me. She had the camera, she had the social platform, the family chat, and she had Michael's silence. That Sunday night I sat down with my husband David and told him everything. The hourly texts, the micromanaging, the shaming in the group chat. He looked furious. David is a quiet man, but when he gets angry, his voice drops to a lethal low register. "You're telling me she watches a live feed of you for 3 days a week just to find things to complain about?" he asked. "It feels that way, David. She texts me about my tone, about their clothes, about their food. I feel like a criminal under house arrest. And Michael does nothing? He just says she's stressed. He wants me to ignore her." David shook his head. "Evelyn, you're done. You call Michael tomorrow morning and you tell him you need a break. You tell him we're going on a trip." But I couldn't. I couldn't just quit. That would be admitting defeat, and worse, it would mean less time with Leo and Maya. Quitting would confirm Olivia's narrative that I was unreliable, overly sensitive, or simply incapable. I felt trapped. No, David, I said, clenching my fists. I can't let her win. I love those kids. I will go back tomorrow. But she has crossed a line. She didn't just criticize my behavior. She questioned my character to the entire family. She used those cameras to lie about me. I'm not going to ignore her anymore. I'm going to confront her. But I need to do it strategically. The next morning I walked back into that house, and the moment I saw the blinking red light of the camera, a cold, hard determination settled over me. I wasn't Evelyn, the doting, docile grandmother anymore. I was Evelyn, the victim of a targeted campaign of humiliation, and I was looking for a way out. A way to dismantle her sense of superiority. I realized the camera was a two-way street. While it gave Olivia the power to observe and criticize, it also recorded her actions. So I started observing her too. I started paying hyper-attention to her schedule. The official story was she worked part-time, mostly from home, doing freelance graphic design. But lately her important client meetings were happening more and more often, extending well past the time Michael came home. Sometimes she wouldn't return until 8 p.m. One evening I stayed late to help Michael put the kids to bed because he was swamped with a big project. When Olivia finally came home, she looked incredible. I mean, not just came from a client meeting, incredible. She was wearing a sleek, expensive-looking dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she smelled faintly of expensive perfume and something sweet like cinnamon. This was a completely different vibe from the messy bun and yoga pants look she rocked while working on her graphic design projects at home. "Hi, Evelyn, still here?" she said, sounding slightly annoyed that I was witnessing her entrance. "Just helping Michael," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "You look lovely, Olivia." "Big meeting." She gave a dismissive shrug. "Oh, just a major presentation. Lots of pressure." But something didn't sit right. Graphic design? A major presentation that required a cocktail dress and perfume that smelled like a fancy bakery? Maybe I was just being paranoid, but the seeds of suspicion were planted. I knew I needed to start gathering my own information. The surveillance had gone both ways. She had been recording my every move for months. Now I decided it was my turn to start recording hers, not with a camera but with careful, constant observation. I was preparing for a counterattack, waiting for the final, unforgivable offense that would justify my total war. I just needed one more accusation, one that was too cruel, too outrageous to ignore. The moment I had dreaded, the one I knew was inevitable, finally arrived. It was worse than the public shaming over the Buzz Lightyear toy. It was an accusation that struck at the very core of my integrity and my love for my grandchildren. It was a chilly Tuesday morning about 2 months after the group chat incident. The atmosphere in the house was particularly frosty. Olivia had been exceptionally cold. She hadn't sent any passive-aggressive texts that day, which was unusual, but her silence was more unsettling than her critiques. I felt the weight of the camera on the mantel like a judgmental eye. Leo, my little 4-year-old fireball, was running full tilt across the hardwood floor in the living room. He was trying to rescue his stuffed dinosaur from the lava, a red blanket. Inevitably, his foot caught the edge of the rug and he went down hard. It was a clumsy, common kid fall. A loud thump followed by a shocked silence and then the inevitable wail. I was right there. I rushed over immediately, scooping him up. He was crying, mostly from the surprise and the sting of the fall. "Oh, my sweet boy. Are you okay?" I murmured, holding him tight. I checked him over quickly. His knee was scraped and starting to redden, but there was no immediate blood, no funny angles. He was just sobbing into my shoulder. I carried him to the kitchen, sat him on the counter and got the first aid kit. I gently cleaned his scrape with a sterile wipe and put a fun dinosaur bandage on it. The whole process took about 3 minutes. He calmed down immediately once he saw the bandage. He was distracted and looking at the picture on the plaster. "All better, my hero," I said, kissing the top of his head. "Lava is very tricky." He giggled, slid off the counter and immediately ran back to save his dinosaur. Case closed. Normal grandmotherly crisis management. Except it wasn't closed. Not in Olivia's world. 10 minutes later, Michael called me. His voice was tense, ragged. "Mom, what the hell happened?" he demanded, skipping any greeting. "Michael? What are you talking about?" Leo took a spill. "He's fine, just a skinned knee." "A skinned knee?" Mom, Olivia just sent me the footage. He's got a big bruise forming on his arm and she says he was crying for a full 7 minutes after you put the bandage on. She thinks you handled it all wrong. A bruise on his arm? I frowned. He fell on his knee. I checked him. He's running around right now completely fine. She's looking at the video, Mom. She said he was covering his arm when you picked him up and you didn't even look at his arm, you just focused on his knee. She thinks you were trying to cover up something worse than a simple fall. She said you might have been too rough when you scooped him up. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart started hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from a surge of white-hot, furious indignation. Michael, put her on the phone, I said, my voice dangerously steady. She won't talk to you, Mom. She's too upset. She thinks you might have yanked him up too fast, or maybe he was trying to tell you something and you shushed him. She says she can't trust you to be honest about injuries anymore. The implication hung in the air, cold and sickening. She was accusing me of deliberately hurting my grandson, or at the very least of gross negligence and an attempted cover-up. This wasn't about sugar, tone, or blankets. This was an accusation of child abuse, however subtle, broadcast through the lens of her paranoid camera system. I am not hanging up until I speak to her, I stated flatly. There was a muffled sound on the other end, and then Olivia's voice, sharp and laced with artificial distress, cut in. Evelyn, this is unacceptable. I saw the footage. He was clearly favoring his arm and you completely ignored it. You only bandaged his knee. Why didn't you check his arm, Evelyn? Are you hiding something? Is there something you're not telling us about how he fell? Her voice was calculated, the tone of a prosecutor presenting damning evidence. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the volcanic eruption of rage inside me contained. Olivia, I said, using her name with cold formality. I handled a standard, non-serious fall by a 4-year-old child. I comforted him, I checked him over, and I treated the visible injury. He was fine within 5 minutes. To suggest that I would hide an injury, or worse, that I was responsible for causing it through negligence, is not only outrageous, it is a disgusting, unfounded slander. The video speaks for itself, Evelyn. We can't have someone watching our children who doesn't report all injuries, especially when there's a pattern of misinterpretation, like with the Buzz Lightyear incident. We can't have this constant ambiguity. The use of the word pattern and the callback to the previous incident was deliberate. She was building a case against me, using carefully edited or misinterpreted surveillance clips. The final straw had shattered. I felt a switch flip deep inside me. I was done being the passive, polite victim. Listen to me, Olivia, I said, my voice rising slightly. I have watched my grandchildren under your constant hourly surveillance for over a year. I have endured the micromanagement, the insulting texts, and the public shaming. I did it because I love Leo and Maya. But this is an accusation of abuse. I will not stand for it. I am leaving now, and I will not return until I receive a genuine public apology that acknowledges this grotesque overstep. There will be no apology, Evelyn, she shot back, her voice shaking slightly, betraying a crack in her composure. I am protecting my children, and the video proves my concerns are valid. Then enjoy watching your children on the video feed, Olivia, I said, and before she could reply, I hung up. I walked straight to the mantel, looked directly at the camera, and gave it the most level, cold stare I could manage. Then I grabbed my purse and walked out the door, leaving Leo happily playing with his dinosaur. I didn't say goodbye to him. I simply couldn't trust myself to speak another word inside that house without screaming. Driving home, the rage subsided, replaced by a steely resolve. I knew I couldn't simply walk away. If I did, Olivia would spin the narrative. Evelyn quit because she couldn't handle the truth about her rough handling. I had to fight back, not just to clear my name, but to secure my access to my grandchildren without the constant threat of surveillance and humiliation. I recalled the subtle details I had been noticing over the last few weeks. The late-night homecomings, the fancy clothes, the perfume, the flimsy excuses about client meetings. If she was going to use a manipulated video stream to question my character, I was going to use my own careful observation to question hers. I needed leverage, and I needed something that Michael, in his terrified silence, would finally be forced to acknowledge. I was no longer interested in proving I was a good grandmother. My relationship with Leo and Maya was proof enough. I was interested in exposing Olivia's hypocrisy. I was going to find out what those late-night meetings were really about. The surveillance, the control, the judgment. It all suggested she was terrified of something. And I was determined to find out what it was. This was now a full-blown investigation, and I was starting with the only clues I had. The expensive perfume, the dress, and the suspiciously vague major presentation she mentioned. I needed a turning point and I was going to create it myself. I spent the next 2 days in a state of controlled fury. I refused to answer Michael's frantic calls. I wasn't going to engage in another pointless argument about my competence. I needed facts, not feelings, to win this battle. Olivia had thrown the first punch. A truly vicious one, accusing me of potential abuse. Now it was my turn and I was going to aim for her biggest, best-kept secret. My investigation started with the perfume. It sounds ridiculous, but that sweet, spicy scent she wore when she came home late was a signature. It didn't smell like a typical office environment or a graphic design studio. It smelled like a destination. I called my friend Carol, who worked in retail, and described it. Cinnamon, vanilla, and something floral, very expensive and distinct. Carol immediately recognized it as a limited edition scent called Midnight Bloom, from a very high-end, exclusive boutique downtown. Not the kind of place a freelance graphic designer visits after a major presentation. The second clue was the dress. It was sleek, black, and beaded, definitely not business casual. I'm pretty good at remembering clothes, and I swore I'd seen a photo of something similar online, maybe on Michael's social media. I dove deep into Michael and Olivia's tagged photos, going back months. I finally found it, a picture from a large family wedding 6 months ago. The caption mentioned where Michael and Olivia were sitting. Table 14, right next to Olivia's cousin Jenna. That picture didn't show the dress, but it showed a specific event. I remembered Jenna mentioning something about Olivia's side gig a while back, which I had dismissed as gossip. Now I revisited the thought. I knew Olivia's official work schedule and her client meeting days. I focused on a specific upcoming Thursday, the day she was usually out from 4 p.m. until 8 p.m. I decided I needed to follow her. It was extreme, yes, but I was defending my relationship with my grandchildren and my reputation from a manipulative monster. This was necessary espionage. On Thursday, I waited a few streets away from their house. My husband, David, insisted on coming with me, sitting in the passenger seat with a stern expression, looking like an ex-FBI agent. At 4:15 p.m., Olivia's car pulled out of the driveway. She wasn't wearing yoga pants. She was wearing that sleek black dress, and I could tell from our distance that her makeup was flawless. "Follow her, Evelyn," David instructed, pointing a firm finger. I kept a careful distance. We drove out of the suburban area, past the highway, and toward the bustling, upscale entertainment district downtown. The exact area where the boutique Carol had mentioned was located. This was miles away from her supposed graphic design office. After 20 minutes of driving, Olivia pulled into the valet parking area of the Starlight Grand Hotel. It was one of the most prestigious, expensive hotels in the city, known for its lavish ballrooms and hosting high society events. A graphic design presentation at the Starlight Grand? David murmured, raising an eyebrow. "She's lying, Evelyn." We parked discreetly across the street near a coffee shop. We watched as Olivia retrieved a small wheeled case from her trunk and handed the keys to the valet. She walked into the grand lobby with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. I pulled out my phone. "Okay, David, this is it. I need to find out what she's doing in there." I quickly searched the hotel's events calendar online. Nothing public was listed for the Starlight Ballroom, but there was a mention of a private gala reception in the smaller, exclusive Celestial Suite on the 3rd floor. The description was vague. Charity event for an international educational foundation. I decided to try a different approach. I went back to social media and searched for the name of the international educational foundation that was supposedly hosting the charity event. It took some digging, but I eventually found a series of photos tagged from the previous year's event. The photos showed opulent tables, chandeliers, and people in formal wear. But one set of photos caught my eye. They were professional photos of the event staff, the servers, the bartenders, and the hostesses. And there, in the background of 3 different shots, was a woman who looked strikingly like Olivia, but younger, with her hair pulled back and wearing a uniform. A black dress with a short white apron. She was holding a tray of champagne flutes. The caption was innocuous, "The wonderful team making the night sparkle." I zoomed in on the face. It was Olivia. The cheekbones, the slight indentation in her chin. It was her, dressed not as a guest, not as a graphic designer, but as a high-end waitress or cocktail server for a catering company. It wasn't a low-paying job, but it certainly wasn't the major presentation she was claiming. It was a catering job for tips. This wasn't just a side job. It was a secret she was actively hiding from Michael and the entire family. It explained the fancy dress, it was the uniform, the late nights, events go late, the expensive perfume, to cover the smell of food and smoke from the kitchens, and the rolling case, carrying her serving shoes and apron. "David, look at this," I whispered, showing him the pictures. David stared at the screen, his expression shifting from anger to genuine confusion and finally, pity. "She's working as a server, Evelyn. She's hiding it." "Why?" The why wasn't immediately clear, but the fact was my leverage. She was living a double life. She was judging me for an invented mistake with Buzz Lightyear and accusing me of harming my grandchild, all while she was lying to her husband and the family about where she was and what she was doing. The woman who demanded perfection and transparency from me was built on a foundation of professional deception. This revelation completely changed the game. My goal was no longer just clearing my name. It was exposing her hypocrisy to free myself from her surveillance and control. I knew that Michael would be horrified and embarrassed, not by the nature of the job, but by the extent of the lie. This secret was the key to shutting down the camera feeds forever and reclaiming my relationship with my grandchildren. I had the evidence, the photos, the location, the timing. I needed a plan to execute the revelation perfectly, in a way that couldn't be twisted or manipulated, unlike her camera footage. The confrontation needed to be measured, controlled, and undeniable. I knew exactly where I had to do it. In her controlled environment, their house, with the camera recording every second. I wanted the truth, and I wanted the camera to finally record the real Olivia. The next morning, I called Michael and told him I was coming over to pick up my things. I knew he was working from home, and I knew Olivia was due back from one of her early client meetings around noon. I needed both of them present, and I needed the confrontation to happen directly under the camera's unblinking eye. This wasn't just about Michael and Olivia. This was about the narrative that would be recorded and played back. I arrived at 11:45 a.m. Michael looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Mom, thank God you're here," he whispered, pulling me aside. "Olivia is furious. She says you owe her an apology for hanging up and making her feel like you can't take constructive criticism. She's threatening to hire a full-time nanny." I looked him straight in the eye. "She's the one who owes me an apology, Michael. A public one. Now where are the children?" "They're playing quietly in the playroom." "But Mom, please, can we just move past this? I hate this fighting." "No, Michael. We can't. This stops today." Olivia walked in exactly at noon, wearing her usual at-home outfit, leggings, a massive sweatshirt, and a look of practiced exasperation. She marched straight toward me, already preparing her lines. "Evelyn, I need to talk to you about expectations," she began, her voice tight with artificial authority. "I have reviewed the footage of Leo's fall again, and it's clear we have a breakdown in communication. Moving forward, I need full transparency." "Stop, Olivia," I cut her off, my voice steady and firm, projecting slightly toward the mantle camera. I didn't raise my voice. I simply made sure every word was clear. "I'm not here to discuss your expectations or your deliberately manipulated footage of my competence. I'm here to discuss your expectations of me versus your expectations of yourself." Michael looked alarmed. Olivia just looked annoyed, crossing her arms. "I don't know what you're talking about, Evelyn. This is about my children's safety, not about me." "It's always about you, Olivia," I replied, taking out my phone and opening the photo I had zoomed in on, the one of her in the catering uniform at the Starlight Grand. "You want me to live under constant scrutiny and perfection, reporting every scraped knee and carefully explaining every redirection strategy to the family chat. Yet you don't think you owe the same level of transparency to your husband or the family." I held the phone up, making sure the angle was clear for the camera above the mantle, which was definitely recording. "Michael, darling," I said, turning to my son, who looked utterly confused. "Tell me, what was Olivia doing last night, Thursday night, from 4 p.m. until 9 p.m.? Michael looked at Olivia, then back at me. "She told me she had a major presentation for a new graphic design client downtown." "Why?" I turned back to Olivia, whose composed expression was finally starting to crumble. Her eyes flashed with panic. Is that what you told him, Olivia? I asked. Because I have evidence that suggests you were working at the Starlight Grand Hotel, not as a designer presenting to a client, but as a waitress or a server for a high-end catering company. And you've been doing this for months, lying about your schedule and your job to your husband and everyone who cares about you. I shoved the phone into Michael's hand. He stared at the picture, Olivia uniform tray of champagne. He looked up at her and the look of betrayal on his face was heartbreaking. What is this, Olivia? Michael asked, his voice barely a whisper. Is this true? Olivia's facade completely shattered. The superior, controlled prosecutor was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered woman. She started crying, a genuine, messy flood of tears. It's true, Michael, but it's not what you think, she sobbed. The graphic design business isn't cutting it. We have the mortgage, the bills, the kids' expensive schools. It's too much. I took the catering job 4 months ago because the tips are phenomenal. It's extra cash, tax-free, but I couldn't tell you. I didn't want you to think I was a failure. I wanted you to still see me as the successful businesswoman. I didn't want your mother to judge me. The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. He wasn't upset about the job, he was devastated by the depth of the lie. You lied to me, Michael repeated, shaking his head slowly. You lied to me for months. And you made my mother come over here to watch the kids, all while you were constantly checking the cameras to find fault with her, treating her like a criminal, all because you were terrified she would find out about your secret. This was the key. She wasn't watching me because I was incompetent. She was watching me because I was a constant, real-life presence in her home who could potentially uncover the truth about her late-night absences. The surveillance was a massive projection of her own fear and guilt. She controlled me because she had lost control of her own reality. I stepped forward, regaining control of the narrative. Olivia, you used the security system meant for protection as a weapon of judgment and surveillance. You shamed me in front of the family, and just yesterday, you practically accused me of harming my grandson. All while you were deceiving your husband and living a double life. Do you understand the definition of hypocrisy? She just sobbed, collapsing onto the couch. I was scared, Evelyn. I was so scared of disappointing everyone. You didn't disappoint Michael with your job, Olivia, I said firmly. You disappointed him with your lie. And you destroyed my trust with your cruelty. I looked at Michael. Michael, I will never return here to watch the children under surveillance. If those cameras are on when I am here, I will leave immediately. My love for Leo and Maya is unconditional, but my tolerance for emotional abuse is zero. You need to decide who you trust, Michael, and you need to deal with the deception in your marriage. Michael, finally broken out of his passive stupor, sat down next to Olivia and put his arm around her. The cameras come down, Mom. Today. And if they don't, I'll bring the kids to your house. The resolution was messy, not neat. Olivia and Michael had a long, painful road ahead of them, dealing with the fallout of the lies and the control issues. But for me, the victory was absolute. I had exposed her biggest secret, not out of malice but out of necessity, to free myself from the cage she had built for me. A week later, Michael sent me a photo. It wasn't of the children. It was a picture of the living room wall, showing a smooth patch of paint where the camera used to be. The following Tuesday, I watched Leo and Maya at my house. We built a ridiculous fort out of blankets, ate cookies with sugar, and got completely covered in mud playing in the backyard. There were no cameras, no texts, and no judgments. Just messy, unconditional love. That's the only kind of surveillance I'll ever accept. If you enjoyed Evelyn's revenge and loved this story, please drop a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe for more viral family tales.